How's everyone doing tonight? Great. Good. Great. I like to hear that. So how is everyone doing tonight? Great. One more time. How's everyone doing tonight? Great. There you go. Okay, all right. Okay. I'm going to do a little exercise right now. Why don't you guys stand up? Put your hands high up in the air and wave it like you don't care. All right. Okay. We're good. You guys can sit back down. Okay. Thank you. So this is the finance panel, and thank you so much for coming tonight. And we're just so excited to have 4 great panelists here tonight, and we're just gonna dive right in, okay, because of time. And we're just gonna share a little bit about the bios of each and every one of the panelists, and just so you can get a little bit about, know a little bit more about their backgrounds and who they are, and just their knowledge and their expertise in their fields.
So, Alfred is a certified public accountant, Alfred, and a member of the State Bar of California. Currently, Alfred serves as controller for CalFox, where he oversees all accounting, tax, and finance matters for CalFox and is related entities. Prior to joining CalFox, Alfred was assistant controller for Devico West, where he managed the accounting for commercial real estate debit funds totaling over $1 billion in assets. Alfred has over 10 years of combined business and legal experience, working in private companies, public accounting, and legal practice. Alfred earned his JD from the University of California, Hastings College of the Law, and a BA in Business Economics with a minor in accounting from UCLA. In his spare time, Alfred coaches youth basketball and serves as a volunteer director of Sunset Youth Hoops, a sports ministry of Sunset Church.
So I'll share a little bit about Alfred. You guys ever seen like those big, cranes in the city of San Francisco and around the Bay Area, Cahill Constructions, and all that, right? That's the guy. He's the financial guy that runs the whole show in the background. So that's why he's here on the panel. So really, for skyscrapers, you can't just have these guys that just do the construction piece, but he deals with the finance piece, and he's the expert for that family. So that's huge. The next person in line I want to share is Dennis Quan. Dennis? So Dennis is currently a World Financial Advisor and a senior partner of the Quan and Nahafi Investment Group at Bank of the West. Out in Palo Alto, in South Bay Market, where he manages approximately $250 million of client assets. He is responsible for analyzing client objectives, determining strategic and tactical asset allocation policies, selecting investment managers, and reviewing portfolio results. His clients include high net worth individuals, private schools, unions, corporate retirement plans, and foundations. Dennis began his career over 17 years ago at Morgan Stanley as a financial advisor after studying managerial economics at UC Davis. Woo! I'm hanging too. So more recently, he was a senior vice president of investments at Wells Fargo in San Jose prior to joining Bank of the West 3.5 years ago. During his time off, Dennis enjoys traveling, being involved with his children's extracurricular activities like Hapkido and other sports. So that's Dennis's background. So good personal friend too.
And I'm going to introduce Miranda, my fellow co-worker at PG&E. Miranda is a certified public accountant with 23 years of accounting experience. She spent 5 years in public accounting, landing her first part-time accounting job in college. Then she was offered a full-time position in the same CPA firm, where she gained experience in individual and corporate tax, as well as nonprofit entities, audit, and eventually obtained her CPA license in 1995. Miranda then made the decision that public accounting work-life balance would not fit well with her personal goals of family life in the future. Then she pursued accounting work in the private industry, when a position at PG&E was being vacated by a personal friend. Through a conversation on the bus, and then a referral from another friend within PG&E, started Miranda's career at PG&E, where she had worked there for 18 plus years as senior accounting analyst, gaining experience in the corporate accounting department and capital accounting department. Miranda is married and has 2 girls, ages 10 and 7. She works part-time using her spare time to chauffeur her girls to extracurricular activities, trying new cooking recipes, and serving as a children's ministry deaconess at Sunset Church.
Miranda's amazing.
Thank you.
So Robert Chan. Robert Chan graduated from Hastings College of Law in 1985 and started his career as civil litigation attorney in a large law firm before opening his own practice in 1989. That's only 4 years. Wow, that's amazing. He has handled cases involving intellectual property disputes over software rights and trade secrets, cases brought under Federal Civil Rights Act, security litigation, employment class actions, insurance coverage disputes, wrongful death cases, and a variety of commercial disputes. His institutional clients have included companies such as Fujitsu Limited, McKinsey Corporation, Wells Fargo Bank, RTC, Harvard University, and etc. He has also represented many private individuals who have sustained serious personal injuries. And so Robert is just full of knowledge in terms of the legal side. And so I just want to share with you why we have these 4 panels here. So in a person's financial life, right, you go through obviously financial planning and your personal financial budgeting and etc. And also at the same time, you do need to have some legal things that you want to answer and protect yourself from. And at the same time, you have taxes that you have to pay, right? And so no one wants to pay taxes. So that's why we have 2 CPAs here today, so they can provide you with the best expert advice. And so if we can, just give them a warm welcome applause, please. So tonight, we're going to start off with budgeting. Budgeting is so important, right? I mean, you can have all the money that you want, all the money that you can have, but if you don't budget, I mean, everything just disappears. And so we're going to start off tonight with budgeting, and we will have Miranda share about budgeting. So.
Thanks. I'm really glad to be here tonight. For the first time, I'm not talking about children, and I'm not talking about music. I actually get to talk about the profession that I've spent so many years working in. So I'm really glad, and thank you for inviting me. Before I jump into budgeting, I just wanted to ask you guys some questions and see how aware are you of your finances. So I'm actually going to ask you a question. What do you think are some of the worst money mistakes you can make? So shout out some answers. What are some of the worst money mistakes you can make?
Buying a new car?
Find a new car. No?
Strip club.
Strip club.
I'm sorry.
Strip club. Next. Gambling.
Anyone in this section over here?
Shopping. Oh, someone's really honest. Thank you.
One honesty.
So you're covering my first point, which is fueling an overspending budget. Name some other money mistakes that you could be making right now, or people in your age group. So I'm just gonna kind of estimate how old you guys are, and I'm really bad at that. So in your age group, if you're just graduating from college, you're just starting off your jobs, you know, what are some other money mistakes that you think this generation is making? It may not be you, maybe just in general. So we listed one, which was fueling an overspending habit. So there are people that they just keep spending. You know, finally, I have my first job. I can buy this, and I can buy this, and I can buy this. And pretty soon, like I tell my kids, the money's out the door already, there's no more.
So how many of you, at this moment right now, how many of you know how much you spend on, let's say, entertainment? Do you know? No, okay. How many of you know, how much you spend on shopping every month? Not really. Right? How many of you know how much you're spending at all, your budget? Okay, we have a few hands. Okay.
How many of you guys know how much you make?
Oh, there's more hands.
How many of you guys know how much you make? Okay. All right. The next amount that you make every month?
Zero. No, no.
Like,
It might be negative.
At least
It might be
roughly.
negative.
Okay. How many of you guys have credit card debt?
It's okay to be honest.
Be honest.
I have credit card, but it's not debt.
How many of you guys have student loan debt?
Hmm.
It definitely is getting more and more expensive to get that education.
So, no, that's good. That's
And
good.
so, and I think what Miranda's getting to is, and what we're trying to talk about budgeting is, before we can talk about anything else in terms of investing, you kind of need to save enough to make a difference, right? Like, if you save $100 a year, that's just, there's just no way you can invest in such a way where that can grow to a point where, you can someday retire. So, the realistic reaction is you've got to save and you've got to curb your spending. And I'm just going to mention it, from my experience, like when I was 20s, I remember to this day, I remember exactly how much my very first paycheck was. My very first paycheck as an intern at Deloitte & Touche was like $964 after taxes. Basically it was after taxes because there was no benefits other than that as an intern. And I remember very first thing I did, can you imagine, it's like a windfall. It's like $900. Wow, what can I do? So the very first thing I did, bought a DVD player. First thing I did. I bought a DVD player, put it right, I think it was like $130. You can get like a DVD player for like $20 now. But it was $130 because it was brand new. And there might have been only, because I loved to watch movies when I was in college. I don't know about you guys, but I love watching movies. And so I bought a whole bunch of DVDs too while I was at it. Because at Hollywood Video, mostly they just had like videotapes, VHS. I don't think any of you guys even remember what a VHS. How many remember what a VHS tape looks like?
We're not
Right?
that young.
Well, and I went out and I bought the newest DVDs, and I just go watch. So in my house right now, if you come into my house in my living room, there are literally boxes of DVDs that my wife has organized in alphabetical order. Literally like at least 30 boxes of movies that I'm probably not going to see anymore. Or at least very few of them. The classics like Shawshank Redemption and Usual Suspects. But aside from that, there's like at least 50 to 100 DVDs that I've seen once and I won't see again. And it was a complete waste of money to spend it on, at $15 to $20 a DVD when I was 22 years old. And I look back at that and I think about my spending habits when I was, right in college and right after college. And I think about how much I could have saved. And that's, part of the reason why I'm here today is because I wanted to tell you guys, to learn from, my mistakes, not just spending mistakes, but also investing mistakes, so that hopefully you don't repeat the same ones that I made.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Okay, so Alfred has already brought up a few more of my points, so I'm going to just put it up on the screen. So the second one is, another mistake is living without a budget, and I'll go into that a little bit later. And then the third one, we mentioned about student loans, so neglecting student loan repayment. So we definitely don't want to be doing that. And then the fourth one is relying on credit cards to fill income gaps. So, it's really easy when we get those credit cards, just keep spending, just stick out that credit card, but pretty soon those credit cards are just gonna accumulate so much, can you pay it back? Are you like paying your credit cards in 3 months, or are you paying it when it's due? Okay?
How many of you know your credit card interest rate? 1, 2, okay. How many of you have balances on your credit cards every single month? It's okay, raise your hand. Balances on your credit cards, okay? And how are you planning to pay that off? It's difficult, huh? Yeah, so we'll just talk about the budgeting piece.
So let me put up number 5 and number 6. So number 5 is living without health insurance. So I'm hoping that for those of you that are employed, that you're having health insurance through your job. But yeah, let's not live without health insurance because sometimes, usually at this age, I would think that most people are relatively healthy. But you know, if you happen to be really sick, it could lead to bankruptcy if you don't have health insurance. Okay. And then the last one is trying to keep up with the Joneses. So some people, we tend to look at what other people have, and then we just want to have what they have. So the thing is, I think if your truest friends aren't going to look at what you have, So let's not keep up with the Joneses, okay? Okay, so basically, pointing out these mistakes, I'm just trying to point out that poorly managed finances during, the 20s, can take its toll on your credit report and make it much harder to save money for your future. So it's good to start having these habits of having good financial habits so that it won't haunt you for the rest of your life. Okay? All right, so let's get into a little bit about budgeting. So I don't know how many of you know about the 3 jars. So we could put that slide up. How many of you guys know the 3 jars? How many of you guys grew up on the 3 jars? Well, let me tell you a story first about the 3 jars. Because actually, I'm just starting this myself at home. So the 3 jars, the concept of it is creating a means to teach children responsible savings practice. And this actually was inspired by a businessman, John Rockefeller. Okay, so he was trying to teach his children how to think properly about money. He gave each of them 3 jars. Whenever they received an allowance or money from doing chores or a gift of money, they had to divide it into thirds. 1 part to spend, 1 part to save, and 1 part to give to others. So this simple lesson just made a deep impression on the children and et cetera, et cetera. So this whole concept of the 3 jars actually, and about saving and everything, actually starts when we're kids. It doesn't start now, So right now, at home, I'm already telling my kids to go find 3 jars. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just go find 3 jars and, label 1, spend, share, and save. And as they receive money, whether it's from their grandparents, from doing house chores, sometimes, man, if you give them money, they'll be doing their house chores fast. So, but it's just teaching children to be responsible about money at an early age. So this is just to get us thinking a little bit about budgeting. So, here's another question for you guys. What are your experiences in managing money when you were growing up?
Experiences in managing money growing up.
When you were kids?
Spend what I had because I didn't have a lot.
How many of you don't know what a red envelope is? Raise your hand. Red envelopes. The red envelopes. Okay, 3rd Chinese New Year, you get a red envelope, right? So what do you do with it? Shout out your answer.
Open it.
Open it. Okay, and then what you do?
Put it in the college fund.
College. So buy stuff. Okay. How many of you spend most of your red envelope money? How many of you save it? Whoa, that's good. Okay, there'll be more stuff for you guys. Nice. So how many of you save some and spend some? Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so growing up, I knew that my dad was my bank. So dad was the provider. Whenever I needed money, he would be the one giving me money. And I just knew that my mom would always tell me to save my money. So yeah, I knew that we got red envelopes. I don't think we ever kept them. I think whenever we got it, we just gave it to my parents. So that was my knowledge about managing money. So, you guys are at a really great state that you guys can learn how to manage your money. So let's go to the next slide. So I'm just going to introduce a principle called the 50-20-30 rule. Now this isn't set in stone. This isn't like the only way that you can create a budget, but this is just a guideline, okay? So you all need to know how much you make first, okay, before you can set the budget, okay? And your budget could be as simple as, if you guys know how to use Excel, all you have to do is just have a column, one column for every single month. You need to know how much you're spending. So your first column could be income, and then you would be, your next row would be like expenses, and then you would list all the different expenses that you're spending money for. So you need to know what your actual spend is in order to create this budget. So I'm just going to kind of give you a guideline of the 50-20-30 rule. So 50% of your income, you're going to focus on your essentials. What does that cover? So essentials are basically, your absolute necessities of life. This might seem like a high percentage, but once you consider like how much you're spending, it might make more sense. So this would be like your housing, your food, your transportation, your utilities. So these are the must-spends in life, okay? Then the next part is your 20% of your income are your financial obligations. So that could be, this is where your savings contributions are going to come in that we might talk about later. So this will include your retirement, emergency savings. So you guys know about emergency savings? So usually the general rule of thumb is that your emergency savings should be 3 to 6 months worth of your living expenses. So a lot of people might suggest that you start off with $1,000 first, and you grow your emergency fund, because you never know when there's going to be a bad day, when all of a sudden you need these funds. And so, later on, when you're married, you have kids, your emergency fund has to even grow more, and you might even start thinking about life insurance too. So, as your life situation changes, your financial situation will change as well.
Do any of the panelists have an emergency fund? I guess all do. And then, would you guys like to share quickly how'd you came up with your emergency fund?
Sure.
Oh,
So, your emergency fund basically is going to evolve, it's going to change. When you guys first start working, you guys are living at home, you don't need as much for an emergency. But then eventually you're going to move out, maybe you're going to have roommates, and then you're going to have your fixed expenses are going to climb. But you have to think about the unknown. What could possibly happen if you lose your job? Or maybe something serious happens and you can't work because you have a medical condition, or you're just going through a phase where you just have to have time off. So the emergency fund is really going to be your safety net, right? For me, I have about maybe 9 or 10 months of emergency funds that's just readily available to me that I can access at any time without any type of restraints, right? The way I came up with that was basically I looked at all my fixed expenses, what I pay, for, let's say, mortgage or rent for you guys, your insurance, car insurance, what you spend on gas, your food, utilities, right, which would be like cell phone, electricity bills, those type of things. And you gotta get an idea and get it down pretty accurate. Like, I know just for my basic living expenses, I need $1,000, $2,000 a month, right? So if you're gonna set aside 6 months, then you're gonna need at least 12,000. But you probably wanna add a little bit more than that, just because, you still gotta live, you gotta eat, and, maybe you're gonna, still hang out with friends and go out once in a while. So you really need to have that as a safety cushion. And once you have that, then it actually frees you up to kind of focus in on the other areas of like financial planning, like trying to grow your wealth or other financial goals. But I would say the very first thing that you guys should have is definitely an emergency fund. That's number one.
When did you start your emergency fund?
I started my emergency fund when I started working when I was 22. And at first I was living at home, and I think I didn't pay rent when I lived at home. My parents were pretty cool. They just let me live rent-free. I didn't have to pay anything actually, which was really nice. I mean, they had dinner for me on the table. So my emergency fund was maybe, I want to say, maybe about $4,000 or $5,000. It took me maybe about 3 months to save that up.
How many of you have an emergency fund? How many of you have a emergency fund of mom and dad? Be honest, it's okay. You know, okay, all right, just put it out there. Okay, go.
I think I'm already starting to feel guilty attending this because, confession number one, I've never done a budget in my life. I'm, I'm a strange person to have up here on the panel on savings, but I'm pretty sure I have an emergency fund that will last me for a while. My approach has been to take care of the usual bills that people have and just to pay it off. You know, pay off the house, and you don't have to worry that much about rent. You pay off your cars, you don't have to worry about car payments. So I think I can last a pretty long time. I don't know how long I can last because I don't have a budget, but I think it's okay.
Thanks for sharing. The budget, you're always going to tweak it, like I said. Just creating it the first time, it's probably not going to work, and you're going to have to tweak it again. So just don't think of it as being something fixed. Okay, so we're just going to move on. And besides emergency savings in this 20%, and it's also a place where you're going to categorize debt reduction if you have debt. Okay? So the last 30% of your income is personal choices. So this is the nice to have budget. Nice to have category, I mean. Okay? So, so this category can make the most difference in your budget, and this is the voluntary obligations that enhance your lifestyle. Okay? So, this 50-20-30 rule, it's especially helpful for people with like little financial experience. So this is just a guideline, like I said. I'm sure if you went surfing on the internet, you probably could find other ways to create a budget. So tonight I'm just introducing something kind of simple. And one tool that I recently started to use is a software called Mint. And some of you guys are shaking your heads, so I think you're familiar with it. So, mint.com, and it allows you to create a budget. It allows you to track your actual expenses. And so I love it because I can see everything in one screen. And so I've been using that. I just recently started to use it. Before then, I was using Quicken. And I used to track every single penny, but now it's just getting to the point that there's too much to do and I can't do that anymore. So I see it more as a big picture. And actually in my household, my husband actually takes care of our finances mainly because I guess I'm just too busy with the kids. But I think, we work together really well, and so I'm really aware of what's going on financially. So I feel like, as some of you may head into, marriage, that, both parties should be aware of the financial situation, not just one side. Okay. So.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Miranda, on the budget planning. So now the next step is now you have income coming in. Now you've budgeted, and now you know how much money is going out, and then you have some savings, right? Income, disposable income. What are you going to do? If you budget well, your disposable income will increase. But what are you going to do for savings? Planning for retirement. You put in a savings account, money market, stocks, bonds. I don't know. So let's ask the experts.
I almost feel like we haven't spent enough time on budgeting and spending. How many of you guys go onto Slick Deals or Ben's Bargains or Tech Bargains every day? How many? Or Amazon.com or
Ooh, there's more hands.
let me see, what else is there? Guilt
eBay.
or what else? Any
Groupon.
of those. Or Groupon. Right? I really admit I go on I think Slick Deals every day. But the thing of it is, and what really changed sort of my outlook, because I actually don't budget in detail. For me, I have a target goal as to what I want to save every month. And my wife Julie and I, we together know what that goal is every month. And, we work together to hit that target every month. And that's inclusive of tithing and all of that. But, what really actually changed my mind about spending habits is, I read a lot. It's part of my nature that I love to read. And so there's actually a movement out there called Early Retirement Extreme, or, and I don't know how many of you guys have heard of it, but it's basically a bunch of guys or women who want to retire by mid-30s. Mid-30s. Just imagine that for 1 second, to be retired and not have to work by the age of 35. And, the way they do it is they really curb their spending. They curb it to the point where they don't buy a car. They live close to their office. They walk to work, or they take a bike to work. They downsize on the home that they live in. And a lot of it can't be applicable to here in San Francisco just because of how expensive it is to live here. And many of them will move to Colorado or Portland, where housing is cheaper. But that same mindset still applies, which is, I don't know how many of you guys love to work. How many of you guys love to work? I don't really love it. Brad's sitting back there. Brad, that's because you don't have to report to anyone. There's no boss but you. So, but for those of us who don't really love to work and feel like our calling is something else, perhaps, not spending money is a goal to aspire to. So I really want to stress that, because that's really the first step. And now that you're in your 20s, think about that. That there are guys out there who are 35 and retired. I read this blog called Brave New Life. He only blogs once in a while, but he retired earlier this year. He's like 36. And coworkers are asking him, aren't you going to be bored in retirement? Aren't you going to be, what are you going to do? What are you going to do, right, when you don't have to work? And his response was, well, I'll decide when I finally wake up in the morning. I don't know about you guys, but I like to sleep. So I'm like, oh, that rings true to me. So that's part of the reason why I would really emphasize and stress not to spend.
Let's do a quick poll really quick. How many of you are students right now? Raise your hand. Okay, thank you. And how many of you are working? Put your hands up. Okay. So let's have the people who work for a private company. Raise your hand. How many of you work for the public sector? Okay, we have a good few hands. Great. Okay. How many of you have been in the industry worked for a year? Raise your hand. 1 year or more. 1 year or more. 1 year or more. Everybody raise their hand. 1 year or more. You work from one. Okay. 2, 3, 4, 5 or more. Okay. So I just wanted to give a little, idea of who the audience would be. So, yeah.
And I'm not saying not to spend at all, but just make wise choices.
What type of savings or investments, or what type of saving ideas that you guys have, or Robert or Dennis, or any. I already see Robert smirking.
No, I think my wife would have a good laugh if she knew I was up here talking about saving. She's really the only one in our family that, by nature, is a saver. She's the type of person, when she was young, if her mom bought her a present, she would cry because she thought her mom was wasting money on her. And I remember when we were first married, she would actually cut coupons for herself, and then she would cut another set of coupons for me and stuff it in my wallet, hoping that I'd use it. And I'd take the coupons and just toss them out. But we were really polar opposites in our spending. So I've always envied the couples like Alfred and his wife, who are on the same page. Spending was a source of major conflict for us for many, many years. When you have a save-aholic versus a spendaholic. You try to put the two together. And so over the years, I think we've both kind of grown up a little bit and we've matured so that she realizes that there's a time to really spend. There's a time when saving doesn't make sense and you really should spend. And I've finally been able to acknowledge that a lot of my spending is kind of mindless spending. This is not out of reflex. In terms of investments, I think early on, because I didn't like the idea of saving, because it was so against my nature, what I ended up doing, because I couldn't save for retirement, that was just too far. I couldn't get my mind around something like that. So what I did, I think after a few years of working, I realized that there were things that I wanted to do professionally, cases that I wanted to take. And the only way that I could take those types of cases was to have a war chest. I mean, this is a short-term goal, but in order to do the kind of work that I wanted to do, which would ultimately be profitable, I had to do some saving, because without a war chest, you can't do those types of cases. So my first investment, I would say I invested in myself. I was a poor investor in stocks. I was always too late. Always missed the timing on the market. I was a poor investor in real estate. So in the end, all I could come up with was just investing on myself, and that's the only thing I felt confident in doing.
So, my situation is a little bit different. I've always had kind of a passion for investments. That's what I do for a living. Pretty much, my job is just to help my clients accumulate wealth, and then eventually live off that, and then develop strategies to pass it on to families or charitable organizations. And that's pretty much what I do in a nutshell. So when it comes to investing for me, the very first time that I invested was actually back in 1995. I don't know if you guys remember a company called Netscape. You guys probably don't. But so Netscape is an internet browser. And I remember I bought that stock at like $15, and literally 6 months later, it had shot up to like $30, and I had like doubled my money in just like 6 months. So when I think about investing, I think about after you have your money set aside for emergencies, it's not about how much money you make from your job, but rather how much money you can save and put a little bit away, right? So there's a lot of different instruments out there that you can just put $100 a month to start with, and you get into this habit of saving. And as you progress through your career, you guys will eventually make more income. And every time you get a raise, you take part of your raise and you add it to your savings, right? So let's say you get a raise of $200 a month, and you take that extra 100, put in savings, and the extra 100 you can kind of enjoy. So now, instead of saving $100 a month, you're saving $200 a month, right? So there's all different types of vehicles, like mutual funds, for example. Does anyone know what a mutual fund is? Okay. Well, let me back home. How many people here have actually invested? So, I guess I'll just kind of go right into it then. So, mutual funds are a way for you to pool your assets with other investors by buying shares of a portfolio. Okay, and the portfolio could have 100, 200, 300 different types of securities, like stocks or bonds inside of them, right? The reason why you want to use mutual funds when you're starting out, because you want to spread your risk out. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, right? Because if you had $100 and you tried to buy a stock, number one, it would be really expensive, because it costs you $8 to probably buy it, right? So that's 8% of the money that you just saved. So it's not cost efficient, right? And with $100, you're not going to be able to buy many shares. You're not going to be able to buy very many companies. You might be able to buy, you can't even buy like a share of Google, right? Because Google's like $1,000, right? So you use mutual funds as a way, because you can get in at $100 a month, right? And depending on the type of mutual funds, there's very conservative ones and there's really aggressive ones, and they do different things, right? Conservative ones, they earn less in the long run, but they're more consistent. And the more aggressive ones can earn you a lot more, but there's a lot of risk involved. So the ride along the way, you're going to have more peaks and more valleys, right? And just to put things in perspective, if you went with something really aggressive, back in 2008, you would have lost about 40%, okay? Because we were in a recession, right? Your foreclosures, real estate was going down, and the stock market was, I mean, it just did horrible that year. But if you were a conservative investor, right, you would have still had a loss, typically maybe, you know, between 10 and 15%. But that's a lot different than losing 40%. Being a conservative investor, in the long run, you could probably average about 6% rate of return in the long run. So some years you get more, some years you get less. So that's what I think about if I had extra money above and beyond, you know, my emergency savings. You don't want to just have it sit there idling as cash, not earning any interest. You want your money to work for you. So eventually, when you accumulate enough assets, when the money's working for you, it actually becomes pretty meaningful. And that's, you know, when you can retire if possible.
So, how many of you, at the end of the day, you have some savings? Do you put it into a savings account or money market? Okay. And what type of interest are you getting? It's like, if it's, you know, let's say dollar is a dollar, right? And the interest that you're getting is like, right? So, what tools are there for us to save? Like, you know, I mean, what's the difference between like a 401k or 403b or Roth IRA, you know, like, I mean, what are those, right? I mean, do you guys have questions of those? Like, what is it, right? What's the difference? So, Dennis, would you, or anybody on the panel too?
Can I ask Dennis a question first?
Yes, it is.
All right. So Dennis, I'm a really poor investor when it comes to mutual funds and all that.
Right.
So you mentioned that 6% is a reasonable rate to expect. I mean, I've had years when I've gone for 4 years and been in a negative or like 1%, you know, return. So what do you do if you're stuck and with a, you know, you've been investing for a while in mutual funds, but it's really going nowhere? How long do you wait?
The short answer to that question is basically, you have to look at how the overall market is doing, right? So if you're earning, let's say 1% a year for the last 4 years, and the overall market has been flat, or actually in a down market where it's just, you know, the economy here in the US is getting smaller, so the stock market's going down, that's actually pretty good getting 1% a year for 4 years, right? So you gotta have some sort of benchmark to compare your investments to. And honestly, the best way to do that is to go on the internet. You know, there's companies out there that will do the research on, you know, different types of investments. And they'll give you a rating. And they'll tell you, oh, it's a 5-star fund, or it's a 4-star fund, right? And the way they give the, you know, the ratings are based on a whole bunch of things, like how much risk is there with that investment relative to the other similar types of investment in the same area, costs, right? You know, so there's a whole bunch of variety of factors. But in my opinion, if you do the research and you find out that the mutual fund that you own is left below average, then that's probably a pretty good reason for you to leave it and go into something that's much, you know, has a higher rating.
I think Dennis is far too modest. I think my answer would have been just fire the mutual fund managers and hire Dennis. but you know, I think what you invest in, you have to really know yourself. You have to know your personality. You have to know your personality because I feel like nowadays investors are very lazy. So, in my opinion, you should never invest in something you don't fully understand. And a lot of people don't know what they're really investing in. When they look at a mutual fund, they see, oh, you know, it went up 5% last year, but down 3%, you know, 3 years ago. And they base their investment decisions on the rate of return, which is really past performance, right? So, you know, there's a saying that I always love, which is past performance is not an indicator of future performance. And, you know, I used to be a guy who would be a passive investor. So, when I first started and I first saved a little bit of money, I admit I didn't buy I didn't spend all my money on DVDs. I only invested in index funds. And one of the reasons why I invested in index funds is one, and who knows what an index fund is? Let me start there. So basically, an index fund buys stocks that tracks a certain index. And in my opinion, I bought shares of the S&P 500 index fund, which tracks basically the top 500 companies in America, essentially. Okay. And in my mind, that's it's a relatively easy investment for me to understand. I know it's got shares of IBM, Microsoft, all the big names in America. And in my mind, it's like a little less risky because these are big companies. They make tons of money. So yeah, the likelihood that one would default or fail is pretty small. And the other reason is because index funds tend to have a very low cost in terms of expense-wise. So every mutual fund has what I will call an asset management fee, which is the fee that the mutual fund manager charges you to manage your money for you. They range from, at a high of close to 2%, and that's 2% of your money. So versus, an index fund, a lot of times they'll charge you 0.20% or 0.10% if you're, if you have enough assets. So I used to be a guy who just did, passive investing. The thing about passive investing, though, is you can never earn more than the average rate of return in terms of indexing, because basically my return will track exactly that of the S&P 500, exactly, minus that little asset management fee, but it will track exactly to that, and it should track it. But personally, I actually came to the conclusion that, and this is my personality, is I love to read, as I mentioned before, and I love to investigate, and more importantly, I love to find bargains. And that has a lot to do with, that's why I go on slick deals like every day, right? And I love to find bargains in stocks. And so I read this book, which I actually brought today. I actually have two books that I highly recommend, which is called F Wall Street, one of the best books I've ever read. Because basically, and it's by a guy named Joe Ponzio, and his argument is a lot of mutual fund managers really don't want to go or strive to do better than average, because they're judged by their performance, and if they generally track the index, if the index like the S&P 500 is down 5% and they're down 5.5%, no one's gonna even blink an eye, right? But if they're down like 10% and the S&P 500 is down 5%, then someone's going to get fired, right? Because the market's all about, and a lot of it is about return and instant return. So, in my mind, a lot of mutual fund managers are just shooting for average. And, my personality is one where I'm like, you know what, we can do better. I can do better managing my own money than these guys, sitting and being paid, millions of dollars to manage your money for you. And I feel like when I do my own research, when I do my own thinking about investments, I can better understand the risks that I'm taking. So that's the other thing, is that when you invest in a mutual fund, very rarely will you understand the risks that you are taking. And because you are essentially paying someone else to do that for you. And so in my mind, I feel like it's a very lazy way to handle and steward your finances. And so that's just my personality and my perspective. The other book that I would really recommend is also The Little Book That Beats the Market by Joel Greenblatt, which is a very interesting book and back-tested. Of course, the first 20 pages of this is a letter to Joel Greenblatt to his kids telling them they need to save money. And so that's why I also emphasize that once again, because if you can't save money, a lot of this will not be very helpful.
So, yeah, as I was listening to Alfred, some of you might be in the situation where your company gives you a 401k, and all of a sudden, they say that, here, you can either manage this 401k, or you can hire, somebody to manage it for you. And so maybe, Dennis, you can, would you recommend, if someone totally doesn't know how to invest in their 401k, their company gives you a really nice 401k package, but they don't know how to invest in it, would you hire, I guess, the company that is helping, the company to manage the investment for that employee?
So here are my thoughts to that. If you have no clue at all, it's best to go seek help, right? Because this is your retirement money that you're trying to invest, right? This is going to, at some point in the future, allow you to leave your job or allow you to reach a point where you're working because you want to, not because you have to, right? So, if you know nothing about investments, I would strongly suggest consulting with someone, but also don't just hire someone out of the blue. You need to do your research. You need to do some reference checks, right? I mean, there's a website that you can check and type up the name, and you can look at their background to see if they have any complaints, right? You want to do your homework on the person that you hire that's going to give you advice on how to invest your 401k. And over time, you're going to start learning, right? Because if you hire someone, they're supposed to review the accounts with you and kind of tell you what's going on, where the opportunities are, where the risks are. And more importantly, the person that you hire should be able to explain the investment in a simple term so that you understand what you're getting into, right? So a lot of my clients, I ask them, okay, can you explain to me what I just told you? Why you want to do this? And if they can't, then I'm going to explain it to them again until they can explain it back to me. Because that's really, really important, right? So you want to find someone that's willing to educate you and take you through the learning process. And you will eventually reach a point where you can do a lot of this stuff on your own. And you won't need to hire someone to do it for you. When you hire someone to do it for you, it's always more expensive. I mean, I absolutely agree with Alfred. But if you have no passion, or if you have no time or desire to do it, then it's better to hire someone professional to help you rather than just blindly, allocate your money to different types of funds.
What are the kind of fees that you're talking about here if you went and hired someone to help you?
When you hire someone, such as myself, we typically charge 1% a year of the assets under management. So if you had, $100,000, right, then we would charge $1,000 a year to manage it and to give you advice. That doesn't mean that that's all you're paying, because you're also paying internal expenses of the investments that you own, like a mutual fund, right? I mean, we all heard of Fidelity or, Charles Schwab, right? They have their own mutual funds, right? And if you use one of their funds, they're not doing it for free, right? And if you hire someone like myself, we're not doing it for free. I'm not doing it for free either. So if I charge 1% and the mutual fund charges 1%, then you're paying 2%, right? But then again, if you have no idea what you're doing, right, it's probably better to seek, professional advice. I mean, there are other investments out there that don't have, embedded fees. Like, if you bought an individual bond or individual stock, there's no cost of owning it after you purchase it. So then, that's a strategy to keep the fees down.
Do we have anyone in the audience who has a good track record on investing? Some people have invested before. Anyone with a pretty decent track record?
Have any of you made $1 in the stock market? That's a good track record.
So I would just say this, if you're going to hire an investment advisor, hire a guy like Dennis. But more importantly, I think there are two things that I would look for if I were to hire an investment advisor. First is, honesty and patience to explain to me the investments that they're getting into, and explaining particularly an explanation that's particularly focused on risk, because you really want to understand the risks that you're taking. And number two, you need an investment advisor who's going to disclose any conflicts of interest. Because a lot of investment advisors out there, they're salespeople. They're really there to sell you a product. They get a commission on the sale of this product to you. And I'm just going to share an investment experience because, my mom invested or took the advice, or at least had an investment advisor at Fidelity who recommended a 6% bond to her. And for those of you who don't know what a bond is, it's essentially you are lending money to a company, and they are paying you an interest rate, or at least some interest income, in return for you lending them money, and with a promise that they will pay you back when that bond becomes due. This was a bond of a large consumer finance company called CIT. Trevor smiles now because he knows where this story's going. And at the time, I don't think my mom, or at least I don't think the investment advisor explained to her what she was getting into or the risks that she was getting into. And, like Robert, I get a call when things, I should say this. Lawyers frequently get a call when something goes wrong. And my mom usually calls me when something goes wrong. And the long story short is, CIT factors, I was just going to say, they lend money themselves. And when the people whom they lend money to don't pay them back, then the people that lent money to CIT also don't get paid back. And so in the heyday of the 2008 crisis, CIT actually defaulted on those bonds. And my mom was forced to take a fairly hefty haircut on that investment. And when I say a hefty haircut, it means that she did not get all her money back. And so that's a key lesson that I would want to, that you guys would leave here with is, again, understand the risk that you are taking with your investment. I have a question in the back.
So, why would you invest? Just if your employer offers a 401k that, for example, Vanguard received income, you don't invest in it at all.
Can you repeat that one more time, just so the audience can hear your? Sorry, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
No, it's right there. So, your employer offers you a 401k. Your employer offers you a 401k, but do you have to take it? I mean, you don't want to invest. You're ultra conservative. You don't want to do it. Why would you take the risk? Like 2008, like many parents, family members lost $100,000, $200,000 of their retirement money. Why would you want to invest?
So the question is, why would you want to invest your money into a 401k plan when there's such a high risk that you can lose 20, 30, or 40% or even more of your retirement money, right? So who would like to take that? Okay.
I'll take a little bit. So I've talked about understanding the risks that you take when investing. And that is because you have to measure the risk that you are taking with the prospective return that you have. And so what I would say is, and I'm glad that you asked about 401k, because the thing is, if you park your money in a bank account that earns 0% interest and doesn't grow, what happens is if there is inflation, and admittedly there hasn't been inflation all that much, then the value of your money actually decreases. It doesn't increase. And so my advice is to take measured risks, to take smart, calculated risks. And that's where a really great investment advisor like Dennis is really helpful, because he can measure that risk for you and invest for you. And I wanted to actually, because we're talking a little bit about 401k, I'm going to segue into the 401k slide that we have, which I want to put up. on
Can
the
I answer
screen.
that? Can I answer that quick question really quick?
Sure, I'm sorry.
So 401k plan. I mean, I want to jump in here a little bit because like my company, they have a 401k plan. Every dollar. So how many of you have a matching plan in your company? Like they match like up to a certain percentage, right? You know, you put in $1, they maybe match that dollar, right? So if you have a matching plan, that means if I have put in $1, my company's gonna match $1. So it will require the market to lose 50% in order for me to break even, right? So if the market loses like 30%, then I'm a little bit okay, right? I'm still have a little gain from, and it's not my money anyway, right? So just that's my little take on it. I don't know if that helps. Yeah.
Yeah, so employee matching is really like free money because it's money that your employer is really giving to you so that you can invest in your future and your retirement. And here's the thing, if you invest and you do well and take smart risks, hopefully, you make that 6% return that Dennis is talking about. And over 6%, that grows quickly to a point, and I'm just going to mention it. I mentioned it previously that the 35-year-old who's retired, he's able to do that because he invests in dividend stocks, bonds, a mixture of things where he earns like $50,000 a year just on his money investments. And with 50 grand a year, he can live comfortably in Colorado and live comfortably on his, on that income, which, honestly, it's about having your money go to work for you and having, your money make money, essentially, because that's kind of what it's all about. But again, I want to stress taking smart risks, because that's what it's about. And you can kind of see up here the slide that is up. So what it is comparing is the growth of $5,000 outside of 401k and the growth of $5,000 inside of 401k. So for a lot of you, I don't know how many of you have heard of tax deferrals. Has anyone ever heard of tax defer return? So the idea behind it is when you invest in a 401k, you're not taxed immediately. So if you don't invest in a 401k and you just take the money out from your paycheck, you're immediately taxed on those dollars on your tax return, immediately. But if you put it in a 401k, it's not taxed until you take it out at retirement. And so there's something called the time value of money, which basically means that when you compound, it grows at a much faster rate because it hasn't been taxed yet. And you can just see the difference. This slide is a little, it's not as great because you can't really see, but it's roughly, the difference is about $20,000 at the end of the day after 30 years. So this basically shows, actually 20 years. So how much it would have grown, from age 30 to age 50. And the difference is 20 grand. I mean, that's 20 grand, is a car. It's, to me, 5 trips to Europe, which, I don't know about you guys, but I love going to Europe. So, it's a sizable amount of money. And that's what I would say is wise about investing in a 401k in a tax-deferred account, like a 401k or a 403b. And for those of you who don't know what 401k or 403b, they're essentially the same thing, just based upon what type of employer you have. I would really encourage you guys to think about tax deferrals when investing, about opening an IRA or a Roth IRA, if you don't have and also with 401k as well or 403b.
Okay. So it's 9:31 right now, and we're going to open it up for questions really quickly here. If you have any questions that you have in mind in terms of some of these investment, tools, budgeting, do you have any questions in the audience? Let me grab the. Okay, yeah. Questions?
Do you recommend those with student loans to invest? Do you recommend those who have student loans to still save or pay off the loans? What's a higher priority, or should we do both?
That depends on a couple of things. The first thing is, you gotta look at what is the interest rate that you're paying on your student loan, right? If your student loan is low, and it's like, let's say, 2% or 3%, that's the interest you have to pay, right? If you can invest conservatively, and let's say, get 6% and net 5 if you pay your taxes on it, then you're growing your money faster than the actual interest that you're paying. So you have a little bit of an arbitrage there. So in that situation, I would recommend investment. But let's say the interest rates are like 7%, right? Now that's a totally different story. If my client told me that, hey, I've got a 7%, loan, should I pay it, or should I can pay it with my money, or should I leave it in my investments, right? Then it really depends on, what would we reasonably expect your portfolio of investments to earn on an after-tax basis to pay that off.
And if you have a 17% credit card,
What Dennis says is true of all debt, regardless of student loan or mortgage or credit card debt. So what I like to say about paying off debt that has a particular interest rate, that interest rate I like to call sort of your risk-free rate of return. Because essentially, by paying off that debt, you are, earning the interest that you would have had to pay out. So, for example, and I'm just going to use my home mortgage as an example. My home mortgage is at 2.875%, which is a ridiculously low rate. For me to pay that off, that means I will have earned 2.875%, and it's completely risk-free, right? Because when I pay it off, I know that I'm not going to now have to pay the 2.875% interest. But if I feel like, for example, right now, U.S. Treasury bonds, 30-year Treasury bonds are at 3.3%, give or take. If I were to, and U.S. Treasury bonds, and let me just put it this way, how many know what a U.S. Treasury bond is? Okay, basically it's, you're loaning money to the U.S. government who will pay it back to you in 30 years, give or take. And they pay it back with interest. And, the U.S. Treasury, the U.S. government is probably the most creditworthy, the most dependable payer because they've never defaulted on a single U.S. bond payment. For them to pay me 3.3% on, let's just say I owe $100,000 on my mortgage, that means that, they're paying me $3,300, and I'm paying the bank that lent me the money $2,875. So I get, as Dennis mentioned, an arbitrage. I basically make, 3,300 minus 2,875 is $425. So I make $425 a year by buying U.S. Treasury bonds as opposed to paying off my mortgage. And that's $425 a year. That's 10 really good meals with my wife. It could be 20 if I go to Ramen Dojo. But that's substantial amounts of money, right? So, that's a substantial amount of money. And that's the type of calculus, or not calculus, but that's the type of math that you have to make in your mind when debating whether or not to pay down a loan or keep it and invest it. And like Dennis says, it's what you would reasonably expect to earn on your investments. But I personally like to compare it to U.S. Treasury bonds or California municipal bonds. In my case, I actually invest in California municipal bonds.
great. Any other questions out there? More, come on.
I got a question. This topic is really good though.
That's okay, yeah.
I was actually going to do one of those, I wrote it down, why my credit card is no income gap. I was actually going to do that. What's the best way to do that?
Good question.
So to use your credit card to fill your income, you said?
Yes. I just got laid off.
Okay, so you have a situation where you don't have income coming in, and you're using credit cards to supplement the income gap.
Yeah, I'll get a job later, so.
Yeah. No, no.
But yeah, what's the best way to do that without like?
Okay, you know what? I'll try to answer that, okay? I'm not part of the panel. But do you have a bank of mom and bank of dad?
No,
Okay.
they don't lend me money.
Let's just put it this way. When I was going to college, I didn't really have a lot of money myself. And I didn't have a bank of mom and bank of dad. And I got myself into a bunch of credit card debt. My wife is sitting right there, and she knows, and she would nod her head too. And it's one of those things, it's such a spiraling cycle, meaning you get into such a big debt, and interest rates are 17, 18, and if you default, it goes up even more to 24, 25, 26, 28%. It's gonna get to the point where you're like, oh my goodness, what I'm gonna do? You're gonna borrow money from your friends, family.
That's my question, like how long can I borrow without defaulting? Is there like minimum payments that I can do? And then like, how long can I stretch this? That's kind of like my question.
And it depends
I'm
on,
not sure how it works.
it depends on which type of credit card. And I guess my personal advice is try to avoid that as much as you can, because your credit score is so important to you for a future car.
I'm borrowing the money.
Yeah, it's before, like, exactly, if you want to borrow any type of money, like, let's say, if you want to buy a car, right? If your credit score is, let's say, like 520, which is really low, the lowest, like, I think it's like 400, right? And the highest you can go on a credit score is 850, okay? And so, if my credit score is, like, really bad, even if I want to go out there and get a car, my interest rate's going to be, like, 12%. But if your FICO score is, let's say, 700 or more, if you pay your bills on time, actually, I can get a car payment right now and with the interest rate of like maybe 3.99 or 2.99. So take care of your credit score as much as you can. And why would credit cards be a big no-no? What they do is they look at your total credit that you have and how much balance you have on your credit, right? And they'll be like, whoa, if your limit is, let's say, $10,000, you have $9,999 and you have $1, leeway there, your credit score is going to tank. And if you miss one payment, just one payment, your credit score is going to go down at least 20, 30, or maybe 50 or 60, depending on your balance. And so once it drops, it takes years to get back to where you're at. And I remember when I first went onto one of those online things, my FICO score was like 500 something. I still have it till today to remind myself that, hey, I better take care of this. It took me 4.5 years to get above 700. 4.5 years. But it took me only 3 months to get to where that number is. And so that's why I recommend credit is so important.
So you're about to get laid off.
I'm already laid off.
You're already laid off.
Yeah.
I guess here are the things. I think everyone here on this panel will tell you, and Trevor as well, that taking on additional credit card debt is a last resort, and it's a terrible idea. So I'm going to give you a couple of pieces of advice, which is first, file for unemployment insurance. Number one, and I assume you've already done that. Okay. Second, I would reduce spending drastically. Move back home with mom and dad. Do as much as you can to not spend money, because you're only making the unemployment insurance, right? Basically that's what's coming in. The other thing I was going to say, and I'm just going to mention it for 5 minutes here, is I'd go look for money that is mine already, which is, I don't know if you've ever heard of unclaimed property, but, the state of California might actually have money that is already yours, that has been remitted to the state of California by people who owe you money who can't find you. It's something that I actually tell people, and they don't believe that the state of California has money for them. But I'm just going to tell you right now, my wife had $25 that some random refund company couldn't find her, and it took us like 30 seconds online to go get it, and the check came in the mail and it was $25. I have friends who have unclaimed property, in the hundreds of dollars for the state of California. So, I mean, when you're laid off, and I've been there, I've actually been laid off twice in my life, twice. And, the first thing I would say is you have to reduce spending, and you have to go search for money that is yours, and you have to go collect, essentially. The first thing I would say is it sucks to be laid off. It absolutely sucks. But it gets better because of our faith and other reasons. But it gets better, and I just want to encourage you with those words because honestly, I've learned in my short life that a lot of times things don't go the way you plan them to. And, for some reason, though, usually you can pull out of it. And it's just a matter of sticking through it and being disciplined. And that's what I would encourage you to do, is to be disciplined. When I got laid off the first time, I just lived at home. I searched for a job, which I landed at PG&E, and I actually worked with Miranda 12 years, 13 years ago, I think 14 years ago. But it sucks. But that's what you have to do. You've got to limit your spending so you don't have to. At least try not to tap that credit card, because if you go there, then you set your life back many years. Because like a lot of you guys, you want to buy your first house, right? A lot of you guys will want to buy a house, want to get married, have kids, raise kids, send them to college. A lot of us have those same goals. But once you go down the path of credit cards where they have 18, 19% interest, and your FICO score and your credit score gets plummets because of the fact that you're spending and using the credit card, it really hurts your ability to buy a house. It really hurts your spouse's ability. It just hurts your ability to do things that you want to do later on in life. And and I'm sorry to have to tell you that, but you gotta try and curb spending as much as you can.
Thank you, Alfred. Yeah. Thanks. Yes.
My coworkers were telling me about taking a loan out on your 401k. Is that a form of investing in yourself? Do you recommend it? And is there a penalty? And can you tell me about paying back? Is it all pre-tax dollars, or how does it work?
Before we answer this next question, actually our mic is going low on battery, and we could get a switch.
Okay, so typically a 401k will let you borrow 50% of the current value of it, up to a certain dollar max. And typically it's maybe $50,000 or something like that. When you borrow money from a 401k, you receive the money, like if you want to borrow $5,000, you receive a check for $5,000, right? When you take it, you put in your bank account. Then each time you get paid, automatically from your paycheck, they're going to take some money out to pay the 401k back, plus the interest. And nowadays, typically the interest might be somewhere between 3 and 5% because we're kind of in a low interest rate environment, right? The issue with taking money out of a 401k is that the investments, half of them, if you took out half the 401k, half of them would be sold. You're taking it out of the market, right? And, at your age, you're not going to take money out of your 401k until you retire, which is going to be after 59 and a half. So you're going to have 30, 40 years of letting it grow, right? And if you take out a loan in your 401k and you pay back over a 5-year period, you're missing out on 5 years of earning power inside the 401k. However, you are paying yourself back the interest, right? Because the interest is going back into your 401k. But honestly, if you're paying 3 or 4% 4% interest, you're just taking your own money and paying yourself back inside your retirement account, right? That's just like making your own contribution. It's not really the money's working harder for you. So I would say that borrowing from your 401k should also be a very last resort.
So I'll echo what Dennis said, which is I do think it's only do that if it's a last resort, because you really are losing opportunity costs. Essentially it's an opportunity cost, right? Like lost opportunity to earn more when you take and borrow money from your 401k, and so I wouldn't recommend it either, because inside the 401k, again, it grows in a tax-deferred status. It grows in a way such that you are advantaged, and the way the tax laws have been built, it's more advantageous for you to invest within the 401k. And again, you'll only receive the 3 or 4%, which you are paying yourself. And it's just, to me, that's not the best way to use your money, because in my mind, I think, like I said before, passive income in terms of your money working for you, that's really what you want out of your investments.
Any more questions out there? Questions? Great. Can you share your name, and whoever speaks, can you share your name? Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for speaking. I'm Sean. In my opinion, in terms of investment, valuation is very important. So, actually, likely, which factor do you think the most important to invest to occur in arbitrage situation?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I got the sense that valuation is important, and I agree with that 100%. So, can you repeat the question, perhaps?
Okay, there's many factors occurring in the arbitrage situation. Actually, if we invest if we invest in something and get some money from them, means there should be an arbitrage situation. So, which factors can make this kind of situation for us against the IBs or the other consultants or someone else? Because we are not a professional, and also we cannot use a bunch of money against them. So, but you guys recommend us to invest money. But so, in terms of your opinion, so which factor is the most key factor for us?
Which factor?
So what are some of the key factors for us at this age to invest?
Yeah, because we are not the professionals.
Yeah, because they're not professionals, and what are some of the key factors to look for in terms of
And
investment?
also, I have a question about that. Do you think we can invest and we can make successful investment?
I absolutely believe each and every one of you can make successful investments.
And what are some of the key factors? Like, just quick ones, to shoot out. Like, what are some of the key factors in terms of what you look for?
There is no perfect factor.
Yeah, there's no perfect factors, but what are some of the key factors that you look for?
Well, so the first thing I read every morning is a blog called Across the Curve. It's essentially a bond investment blog that tracks what interest rates are doing in the bond markets, whether it's corporate bonds or U.S. Treasury bonds or municipal bonds, because it's my opinion the smartest people in the investment world are in fixed income, are in bonds. You'll see, because they are constantly evaluating risk. They're constantly evaluating interest rate risk, interest rate movement risk, default risk, which is the risk that a company or a government won't pay you back if you put money in their bonds. They're constantly looking at those types of risks. So I always look at that blog first, because if there is a spike in any rates, that would inform my investment decisions in terms of what what market liquidity is, things like that. In today's market, things move so fast. It's very news driven, but at the same time, I feel like that's kind of where you hear grumblings on the ground, like in 2008, 2009. That's the very first place you look, is the credit markets, and you look at the bond markets. And so, Across the Curve is a great blog that I read to get an informed decision on the credit markets. Another blog that I love to read is it's called Aleph, A-L-E-P-H. It's written by a guy named David Merkel, who is a investment advisor, CFA, and also a Christian as well. And I find his analysis about the overall economy, and his blog is really to try and help individual investors understand a lot of investments. And so I feel like that's so I would say to encourage you guys to read these type of blogs and also to read books, because that's how you educate yourself on the different types of investments. And I really believe that if you take the time and are curious, you can really learn a lot about investing by reading these blogs and by reading like F Wall Street or the little book that beats the market. You can really learn a lot just by taking the time. And this is an easy read. I mean, this is like 100 pages. This is also maybe 150 pages. I could read. You can read this in like a couple days, and it's written in a really easy to understand manner. So that's what I would say, is that to read and educate yourself. You guys are all smart. I know you guys are all smart because you guys went to college or in grad school. It's just a matter of being curious and spending the time to read.
So Robert and Dennis and Miranda, for you guys, what are some of the key factors? When you were at their age, what were some of the key factors for you in terms of investing and saving?
Okay. When I was your age, this was how I dealt with the investment and risk problem, because, like I said earlier, I was a spendaholic. So I didn't have anything to invest until I could get my spending under control. And then once I got the spending under control, I realized, look, I'm about to buy this item that I don't need. If I can stop myself, I've got X number of dollars, because this thing I was going to buy, I'm going to lose all that money anyway, because it's going to depreciate, it's going to turn worthless in whatever, a year or two. So I knew I had that money to invest, because it was money that was going to go to waste. So I didn't mind taking a shot, at investing, learning about the stock market, and maybe taking a higher risk investment than I would otherwise consider. So that's how I did it. I mean, I couldn't even begin to think about investing until I got the stupid spending under control.
Dennis, what about you?
So some of the key factors that I would look at is, start reading like Yahoo Finance, Motley Fool's a good website, right? You can even pick up like a money magazine. I don't recommend taking the advice in those magazines, but just look through it. You're going to see a lot of common investment companies, like mutual fund companies, right? And what you want to do is, once you identify, go to the website and start browsing around. There's usually an area where there's literature that talks about the basics of investments, right? I think Vanguard has one, for example. And, download it, print it out, and read it. And, you'll get an idea of kind of what you're looking for. At least you'll understand some of the terms, right? Or maybe what you'll see inside of, they'll mention a mutual fund on a website, right? Then what you want to do is you want to sign up to a company called Morningstar, right? And you punch in the ticker symbol of that mutual fund, and it'll come back and it'll tell you the rating. Not only will it tell you the rating, it will tell you the historical returns in the past, like different years. And you have to I always tell clients to look at downside first before upside. Because if you lose half your money, that means you got to get 100% return to get back where you are, or where you were. And that takes 7 to 10 years, depending, right? So you want to look at the bad years, and you don't want to just look at one fund, but maybe you want to look at like study 20 of them, right? Look at the return characteristics. How did they do in 2008? You'll see they lose so much. And then look at, research why, right? So for me, when I look at an investment, I'm looking for an investment that does a better job of protecting me on the downside, number one. So if the market drops 40%, I don't want to go down 40%, right? It's got to be less than 40%. And then when the market's going up, if the market's just up 10% and this one's up 11%, then you're doing better than the overall market. If the market's up 10% and your investment's up 7%, well, if you didn't have that benchmark to compare to, then you wouldn't really know that your investment's lagging the average, right?
Let's go to Miranda, actually. Oh, I mean, yeah.
I actually have a question for Dennis. Now that the stock market is at an all-time record high, is it possible to go in at this time and start investing? Or do you think people should just wait until it drops?
Thank you. So yes, the market is near a high, and it really depends on what the purpose of the money is for. Why are you making this investment? Are you going to use it to buy a house in 3 years? Or is this money that's got a longer time horizon, right? If you look at the market in 20-year rolling periods, okay, and what we mean by 20-year rolling periods, like 1990 to 2010. If you put all your money in the S&P 500, so you look at all the different rolling 20-year periods in history, there has never been a period where there was a negative rate of return over a 20-year period. It's pretty slim for a 10-year rolling period. So, to answer your question, Robert, would I put money into the market right now? Again, it really depends what's the objective. If it's my 401k, I'm doing that every month. I'm dollar cost averaging into the market, right? So if you have a sum of money and you're concerned that, hey, the market's kind of high, well, you don't have to put it in all at once, right? You could put $1,000, this month, wait 3 months, put another $1,000, so you can average into the market. That way, if the market's dropping, you're buying, the investments at a cheaper price, and if the market's climbing, then your average cost basis is going to be lower than where it's currently at. So it's a great strategy.
So as I'm listening, I'm kind of thinking back to when I was in my 20s. So I stayed at home, and that's how I was able to save money. And my parents helped me save my money to the point that when I was ready to get married, I was able to buy my first house. So that was my thinking, back then. And then now that, I've been working for a private company, I actually have to start thinking about investing because, the company offers you a 401k. What do you do with your 401k? And so you have the option of either investing the money, you doing the research, or you can hire the company that the company gives you to, handle your investments. And so I am no pro like these people over here in terms of investing. I think you really have to keep up with the market to know what you're investing in. And if you don't do your homework, it could be, a really bad investment. So I've actually chosen to do kind of half and half. I manage a little bit, and then I also have somebody managing a little bit so that I'm learning how to invest my money. And I think my husband is actually a little bit better in keeping up with the business world, and he watches the nightly business report, 7 o'clock every single night. He'll usually use dinner time to watch the nightly business report. So he's really, he actually keeps me up to date with what's going on. And I don't know if you guys think that would a woman have a different perspective in personal finance versus a guy? And actually, I think women tend to be more relational. We might get our financial information just through talking to other people. And with guys, maybe they're just going to do like a lot of reading, a lot of their own, searching on the web and make their decision right then and there. So, those are just some interesting characteristics.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Hi. My question is, right now, since you say that the market is pretty high, but I'm thinking that the Malaysian Air stock has dropped down. So would you recommend to buy it just because of the circumstances?
Sorry, what stock is this?
Malaysian Air?
Oh, Malaysian Airlines. I wouldn't recommend any stock before I did due diligence, but I would say this. So before, and this is something I just read, and this is just anecdotally, which is, so there were a number of airlines that avoided Ukraine, months ago. Asiana Airlines, I forget exactly who else, but there were a number of them, okay? And here's the thing, right? The reason why here's the thing. When they avoided Ukraine, they had to take routes that were not straight lines. They had to go around. And they would have to actually have fuel costs that goes, up and around Ukraine. They had to basically incur additional fuel costs because they have to fly farther and fly longer in order to avoid Ukraine. So they made that economic decision that the risk of being shot down or being of having, a wartime tragedy versus the cost of the additional fuel. Now, when Malaysian Airlines did the same cost analysis, because I'm sure every airline looks at their bottom line and there are people who look at this, they came up to the conclusion that they could not afford the fuel costs, the additional fuel costs of flying around Ukraine. We know how that worked out for them. So my thought is, if they can't afford that additional fuel costs, I don't know if I want to invest in them. Personally, and I'm just going to say anecdotal, so I actually watch the Nightly Business Report on PBS as well, on KQED, like Miranda's husband. And I also have membership in Morningstar, which I actually use because they have a really nice filter called the stocks with the largest fair value discounts. I use that filter religiously as a screen for me to start beginning to read about businesses that are selling at what Morningstar considers to be at a discount, at least a discount to their valuation of the company. So usually these are beaten down stocks. They're beaten down for one reason or another. And that's where I start because, like I said, I like to find a good bargain. And
So since we only have it's 10:05 right now, and we're a little bit over, we're just gonna go quickly around, with the panels here. Just a minute each per person, like what advice would you give to the audience at this age, for financing? From your perspective, what is the general advice that you would give them? So let's start from, Miranda, would you like to start? Yeah, since you started this.
Sure. I think my advice to you all is just to be aware of your finances. Know what's coming in and know what's going out. So that would be my advice.
my advice is to save and read a lot. And I forgot to mention one thing. So another thing I like to read is the American Association of Individual Investors. This is a great magazine. Lifetime membership, I think, is only $250. You get a monthly magazine, and I learned something new, because there are articles in here about IRAs, about 401ks, 403bs, tax deferral strategies, and it's usually written in a way where people can really understand it well. And you get it. I get this once a month. If you want, I can loan it to you. It's really easy to understand, and you learn a lot. I learn a lot just by reading it as well. About 30% of it is stuff that I already know, but I always learn something new. And like Dennis said, I actually started by reading Money Magazine. Not all of it is very useful, but it's a start. And I think educating yourself is the first step.
I have to think about this a bit. You know, I retired at 45, but that wasn't like something that I had planned to do or set as my ultimate goal. I think when I was your age, what I really focused on was just doing my work well. Whatever work I did, I just made sure I did it well. And then the money, the ability to retire, it all came, I guess, as a byproduct of it. I can't guarantee that if you do your work well, you'll be able to retire at 45 or 50 or whenever, but I just think that, you know, I just try to keep, because I think early retirement is almost like wealth. You know, it's something that the Bible says you can't really pursue. So, you know, I just try to be faithful every day, knowing that I'll try my best, but things can blow up. Anything can happen. You know, you can hit financial bumps at any time, no matter what you do. And it all depends on what God, you know, ultimately has in store for you. Just be ready for that, and to be learn how to be happy in all circumstances, whether you're rich or poor, struggling or successful.
So, if I had to give you guys one advice, a lot of you guys are either in the workforce, right? You guys or going from college into your first job. You guys are going to make more and more money, and every time you get a pay raise, you haven't adjusted to that pay raise yet because you're not used to receiving it. So right off the bat, pay yourself more and save more. And I will tell you, for every if you're let's say 23, 24, 25, for every $1,000 you save right now in your 401k, 403b, 457 plan, or IRA, it's going to be about $16,000 when you retire. That's 16 times your money. Okay? And if you don't know how to do your 401k or your 403b, there's a lot of what we call target retirement funds nowadays. So it'll have target retirement fund 2045, right? And you just have to calculate when you're going to turn maybe 65 or 66 and use that as your retirement date and choose that fund. Because it's better to put it in that than to just leave it in a stable, you know, cash value type of investment vehicle inside your retirement account.
Thank you, Palace. Let's give him a hand. It's not easy to be up here, really. It's not easy. So, thank you again. So, it's 10:10 right now. I do want to share that next week we're going to have finance panel, but we're going to go in way more depth than what we have today. And we're going to go into like real estate, we're going to go into maybe tax strategies, maybe even tax brackets, and going into more in terms of like, let's say, offensive and defensive investments, like let's say insurance, you know, and there's different tools. We're going to dive in deeper than today. So today is just the surface stuff, right? And just to get to know our panelists. And as of right now, we're going to have actually a couple of questions that we have that we want to put up on the screen. And these questions are just to, the first question will be on what you think of tonight. Would you come back? And the question would, you just need to take out your phone, start taking out your phone. And then as you take out your phone, then you can actually text. You know, these are some of these, but we're going to start with something fun. I want to start off with something like, let's say, I'll let, you know, the tech people work on this. A fun question. Let's start with a fun question first. Okay, so text. So, Giants or Dodgers, right? Okay, so if you think Giants, if you root for the Giants, text, you know, so punch in the number 22333, and if you want to vote for the Giants, put 626853. If you vote for the Dodgers, okay, 854, okay? So take it out, take your phones out. It does cost you your text, you know, so it's not free, FYI. Right? So this is a poll, just to see if you folks are awake or, you know, who you want to root for. And then it'll be live. One. Whoa, hey, whoa, what's going on here? 1, 3, 2, Dodgers leading. Oh, what's going on? Oh, 3, it's a tie. 6. So let me see here. 7. Oh, okay.
That's all right.
You know, Dodgers fans, you know, you can keep on trying to text. Oh, maybe, okay. This game, 12 to 4, you know, that's pretty good. Oh, 13, 14, oh, the texts are coming in. No, good. 15, okay. 16, wow. This is pretty awesome. 17, okay, Giants fans, you can stop. That's a blowout. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Let's go to the next slide here. We'll ask another poll here. So you folks have your phones out, your fingers are all dialed, and let's go with the next one here. Okay. So, finding the financial information useful. Did you find any of this financial information useful? Absolutely yes. Wow, someone's quick. 2, okay. 3. You can be honest, it's okay. 7, okay, pretty good. I know how many, I like this. People are honest and people are loving it. It's good, no, that's good. Okay, so we have a gauge right there. That's good. Okay, and let's try the next slide here too, actually. Let's go to the topics. Okay. It's kind of fun, huh? You guys think it's fun? Raise your hand. Wow, that's a lot of fun. Okay, let's go with the last one, okay? So this is one that's really important to us. If you can really share from your opinion, you know, like, okay, what financial topic would you like to go in depth next week? Which one? Okay. Wow, whoever it was for the Dodgers, and it's okay to find a home. You guys are quick. Okay. So this will help us to better create a panel that would fit this. Okay. Wow, getting right. Okay, buying a home. Whoa, wow. You can see the battle of the topics, you know. Advanced investing. Wow, okay. So nobody cares about retirement and personal taxes. Not really, not really, right? So, wow, advanced investing. Okay, great. This is good. Any more? Any more? You can text again. Which ones? Don't cheat now. Don't keep on texting one and try to bump it up. Oh, okay, you can. All right, so advanced investing. Okay, buying a home, getting out of debt. You know, that's my typo. I apologize. Okay, good, good. So we'll make that as some of our focuses next week. We're going to have a time of actually snacks and, you know, just a little bit of refreshments that you can actually, you know, spend a time to just hang out a little bit, get to know our panelists. Go up to them, introduce yourselves, and say hello. Tell them, you know, what you think of the night. Stay positive, please. And then also get to know them. Get to know who they are. Ask them some personal questions, you know, and they're really, really friendly. And they may look kind of, you know, professional, but they're really, really friendly. So let's give them a round of applause again. Thank you. So, and the refreshments will be across the street. So one thing we want to try to do, we want to try to like herd cattle here. You know, want to go like moo. So, so what we're going to do is we're just going to walk over together as much as we can, and then we're going to have someone lead us. They'll lead, and yeah, could you start leading us towards the other side, and then if we can have people who are working on snacks, if you guys can prep for all the snacks, and if you haven't signed in, please sign in. What we're going to do is we'll contact you and reach out and let you know any updates and events that we have. So thank you so much, everyone.